I used to think my family wasn't perfect, but fair. We weren't rich, we weren't glamorous. But growing up, my parents always said they treated me and my brother the same. "We love you both equally," they'd say, like a script they'd memorized, and I believed them. Until a single bank notification flipped everything upside down. Let me backtrack a little. My name's Eric. I'm 27, living in a one-bedroom apartment that I can barely afford. I work full-time at a publishing house and freelance on the side just to stay afloat. I don't complain much. I've always been the quiet, responsible one, the one who doesn't ask for help. My older brother, Jason, is 30. He's always been more outgoing, more charismatic, the type of guy who could talk his way out of a speeding ticket or charm someone into a job offer. He works in real estate, fitting, considering how good he is at selling an image. We've always had a decent relationship, even if it was a little distant. We weren't super close, but we were never hostile either. But this changed everything. It started with a weird text from my mom. "Hey honey, can you make sure your bank details are up to date with us, just in case we need to send anything?" I was confused. I hadn't asked for anything. Was she trying to send me birthday money early or something? Still, I replied, "Sure, but why?" No answer, just a thanks. A day later, I got a deposit notification from my bank, $50 from Mom and Dad. I laughed. Maybe it was birthday money, but my birthday was 3 months away. And $50? That was strange even by their standards. Not that I was ungrateful, but they weren't the type to randomly send cash. The next day, while visiting them for dinner, I casually brought it up. "Thanks for the $50. Random, but nice surprise." My mom looked surprised. My dad shifted, uncomfortably in his chair. "Oh, right," she said. "We just wanted to help out a little." It felt like a cover-up. My parents were bad liars, always had been, but I didn't press it. Not then. I wish I had. A week later, I was at Jason's place. He'd invited me over for drinks. His condo was sleek, modern, far too expensive looking for someone who claimed to be still climbing the ladder. We were halfway through a bottle of whiskey when he let something slip. I mean, buying a house is exhausting, bro. Like, even with all the help, it's still a nightmare. I blinked. "Wait, buying a house? Since when?" Jason grinned. "Oh, yeah. I thought you knew. I've been working with a realtor for a few months now. Put down a deposit last week." My stomach dropped. "What help?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He hesitated. "You know, Mom and Dad, they're giving me the down payment." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. "How much?" I asked. Jason shrugged. "I don't know. Like 50 grand, I think. They've been saving for years, apparently. $50,000 while I was rationing groceries, skipping nights out with friends, freelancing past midnight just to make sure I could cover rent and insurance." I stared at him. "They gave you 50 grand?" Jason frowned. "You didn't know?" I stood up without saying a word. I didn't go home that night. I drove around aimlessly, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. My brain kept replaying all the years I'd heard my parents talk about fairness, about love, about how they didn't pick favorites. Lies. I thought back to when I'd asked them, just 6 months ago, if they could help cover a dental bill I couldn't afford. It was $800. They said no. They told me money was tight, that they had to be careful with their savings. They never mentioned they were saving for Jason's house. When I finally confronted them, I expected denial, excuses, deflections, but what I got was worse: justification. "Well," my mom said, "Jason's ready to settle down. He's starting a family soon. He needs stability." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And I don't? I'm barely staying above water." "You knew that," my dad chimed in. "You've always been more independent, Eric. We didn't think you needed the help." That hurt more than anything, because it told me the truth. They saw me as self-sufficient, so they chose not to help. not because I was doing better, but because I never begged, because I never made my problems their problems. And Jason? He didn't even have to ask. I left their house in silence that day. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just walked out and drove home, the cold silence of the car matching the one inside me. They didn't follow. They didn't call. They just let me go. That was the day everything changed. That was the day I realized blood didn't guarantee loyalty. That was the day I finally saw my family for what it really was, and it wasn't equal. It never had been. After that night, I didn't speak to my parents for weeks. Not a call, not a text, nothing. And they didn't reach out either, which, honestly, hurt even more than the betrayal. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd realize how messed up it was. That they'd call, apologize, say something like, "We didn't know how badly you were struggling," or even a weak, "We didn't mean to hurt you," but no, radio silence. I went back to my quiet apartment that I was still struggling to afford, and sat in that suffocating silence, wondering how long they'd been planning this behind my back. How many times I'd sat across from them, explaining how my rent had gone up, how I was taking on side gigs just to stay on top of bills, while they nodded sympathetically, all the while knowing they had a stash of 50 grand with my brother's name on it. I couldn't stop replaying every little moment over the years. The way Jason always got the bigger gifts at Christmas, how my parents paid for his college in full while I took out loans, how they flew out to visit him when he moved to a new city but told me gas was too expensive to come to my graduation. And still, I'd excused it all. Told myself I was imagining things. I wasn't. A few days later, I got a message from Jason. "Hey, I didn't mean to start anything. Mom and Dad didn't want you to know yet. Said it'd just stress you out." Stress me out? That's what they were worried about? Not the fact that they completely blindsided me? I didn't respond. A day after that, my mom sent a text. "We're sorry you're upset. We just thought Jason needed it more right now." No ownership, no apology, just a justification. I stared at the message until my phone screen dimmed, and then, for the first time in a long time, I cried. Not because I wanted the money, but because I finally had to accept the truth. My family had a golden child, and it wasn't me. Work became my escape. I drowned myself in deadlines and manuscripts, stayed late at the office, picked up every freelance job I could. The exhaustion was numbing, which in a way was a relief. A few weeks passed like that. Then one night I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Eric, this is Danielle." It took me a second to place the name. Jason's fiancée. "Hey," I said, unsure why she was calling me. "I know things are weird right now," she said carefully. "But I wanted to talk to you about something." I could tell from her voice that something was off. "I know Jason told you about the house," she continued, "but I don't think he told you everything." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" There was a pause. "He told me your parents gave him the money, but I just found out they didn't give it to him. Not really." Now I was confused. "They, loaned it to him," she said. "But not officially. No paperwork. Just a verbal agreement. And there's a condition." "What kind of condition?" She hesitated. "He only gets to keep the money if you never find out." I froze. "What?" "I overheard him talking to your dad about it," she added. "They didn't want to tell you because they thought it would cause drama. If you found out, they'd revoke the money and put it towards something fair between you both." I was speechless. "They knew they were being unfair," she added quietly. "They just didn't want to deal with the consequences." I hung up the phone and just sat there, so it wasn't just favoritism, it was premeditated, a calculated move to support Jason, as long as I stayed in the dark. The second I found out the whole thing was at risk, they'd gambled on me never knowing, and now that I did, they'd lied. Jason had lied. And now Danielle was confirming it wasn't just a favor, it was a dirty deal with strings attached. I wasn't sure what was worse, being left out or being strategically excluded. That weekend, Jason showed up at my apartment. I didn't invite him in. "I know you're mad," he said, leaning awkwardly against the doorway. "But can we just talk?" I crossed my arms. "You mean talk about how our parents bribed you into silence?" His eyes flickered. "You talked to Danielle." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He looked annoyed for a second, then softened his tone. "Look, I didn't want it to happen like this, okay? I didn't ask for the condition. They offered. And you accepted. He didn't deny it. I needed the help, man." "So did I snapped. "I just didn't know I had to be your level of shameless to get it." He flinched. "That's not fair." "No," I said coldly. "What's not fair is living paycheck to paycheck while my parents secretly bankroll your house." Jason sighed, clearly fed up. "You've always been so damn proud, Eric. You never ask for anything then. Get mad when people don't hand it to you." I stepped forward, my voice low and sharp. "And you've always just taken, without caring who it affects." He left after that. No resolution, no apology. Just more tension layered on top of years of resentment. But now, the line had been drawn. I was done being the quiet, forgotten one. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because something kept circling in my mind, louder than the betrayal, sharper than the lies. If my parents were willing to help Jason as long as I didn't find out, what else had they done behind my back? And if Danielle was telling the truth, then they'd already crossed one line. Who's to say it was the only one? The next morning I called Danielle. "Hey," she said, sounding nervous. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I really mean that." "I didn't do it to stir drama," she replied quickly. I couldn't marry someone who's okay screwing over his own brother. That caught my attention. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "I've been having second thoughts, Eric, about the wedding, about Jason. I used to think he was just the golden child. But now I'm starting to wonder if he's just good at manipulating." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Then she added, "I found something in one of the drawers at his place, and I think you need to see it." Later that day, I met her at a cafe near her office. She looked tense, glancing around like she was doing something illegal. From her purse, she pulled out a folder, plain, unmarked, and slid it across the table to me. Inside were copies of emails, screenshots of texts, and a printed-out copy of a transfer agreement. It was a paper trail, showing that Jason had taken out a silent lien on the house, one that wouldn't show up in public records, but was structured to automatically convert into sole ownership under certain conditions. Conditions that would completely cut Danielle out. "I was never even supposed to see this," she said quietly. "If I hadn't been looking for the ring box, I never would have found it." I looked at the paperwork. The wording was complex, but the intent was clear. Jason had arranged it so that if anything happened, if they broke up, or she left, the house would automatically become his, and she'd be left with nothing. No equity, no ownership. She'd been putting money into renovations, buying furniture, investing her time and future into the home. And he was already planning a trapdoor exit. "That's why I told you," she whispered. "Because if he can do this to me, what he did to you, that was just step one." I left the cafe with the folder in my backpack and my head spinning. Now it wasn't just about being left out. It was about who Jason was becoming, maybe who he'd always been. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table and started thinking. I didn't want revenge, not really, but I did want justice, and I wanted it to be loud, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I went to my parents' house. My mom opened the door, clearly surprised. "Eric? Can we talk?" She let me in, but the tension was thick. My dad was already in the living room, reading the paper like he wasn't part of the problem. I stood in front of them and pulled the folder out of my bag. "What's that?" my mom asked. "Evidence," I said simply, "of what Jason's been doing behind your backs. To me, to Danielle, maybe even to both of you." They exchanged looks. I laid out the paperwork on the coffee table, explaining what Danielle had discovered. showing them the emails where Jason talked about playing both sides, where he laughed about how Eric's too broke to even know what he's missing. My dad's face darkened. My mom looked pale. And here's the part where he admits the deal was to keep me in the dark, I added, pointing at the screenshot. You bribed him with money. He took it. But then he started thinking ahead, taking steps to screw over his own fiancée. And you still think he's the one who needs help more than me? For the first time in, maybe ever, they were speechless. I'm not asking for anything, I said. I don't want your money, but I do want you to admit what you've done. Still, silence. My dad finally spoke, voice low. We didn't know about any of this. Of course you didn't, I said, because he plays you just like you let him play everyone else. Then I turned to leave, but just before I opened the door, my mom called out, Eric, we messed up. I paused, hand on the doorknob. We thought we were helping, she said. We didn't realize how much we were hurting you. I didn't say anything. I didn't have the energy to argue anymore, but I left the folder behind. Let them sit with the truth for once. A few days later, Danielle called again. You broke something loose, she said. Jason's freaking out. Apparently your dad confronted him, and now the house money's being put in both our names. With paperwork. I exhaled slowly. Good. And I broke off the engagement. That surprised me? You sure? Absolutely. If I hadn't seen what he was really like, I'd have spent the next decade wondering why my life kept falling apart. You saved me, Eric, even if you didn't mean to. A week after that, I got a call from my mom. Your father and I want to help you. With a down payment. No strings. No conditions. Just something to make things right. I didn't answer right away, because by then, I'd already figured something out. I didn't need their money. I just needed them to finally see me. And for once, maybe they did. It had been a few weeks since the storm passed. The tension with my parents, it didn't vanish overnight, but for the first time in years, they started trying. My mom called to check in. My dad, awkward as he was, actually sent over some financial planning books and a handwritten note that simply read, We should have been there sooner. Dad, I didn't frame it. I didn't even respond, but I read it a few times. Danielle and I kept in touch. Turns out she moved into her sister's place and started therapy. She said the breakup wasn't just about Jason. It was about breaking free of a pattern she didn't realize she was stuck in. You get used to accepting less, she said once, until someone shows you what respect looks like. That stuck with me more than I expected. As for Jason, he stayed quiet. The family group chat that used to be flooded with photos of him and his new house turned into a ghost town. My parents didn't speak much about him after the confrontation, not because they were angry, but because they were ashamed. I think it finally clicked for them that enabling someone isn't love. It's permission to keep hurting others. They stopped giving him that permission. I started rebuilding my own life, piece by piece, with no help from them, by choice. I picked up more hours at work, then started freelancing on the side. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And the small one-bedroom apartment that used to feel like a punishment now started to feel like freedom. For the first time, I wasn't stuck in my brother's shadow. I was just Eric, figuring it out on his own, and somehow that felt better than any check ever could. One afternoon, my mom called and asked if I wanted to join them for dinner. She said they'd love to talk, maybe make things better. Jason wouldn't be there. I said I'd think about it, but I didn't go. Not because I was still mad, but because I finally understood that healing isn't always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's about protecting your peace. I wasn't ready to go back. I might never be, and that was okay. A few months later, I passed a coffee shop and saw Danielle through the window. She was smiling, laughing with a friend, her eyes brighter than I'd ever seen. She didn't notice me. I walked away smiling. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most. not because they hate you, but because they never saw you clearly. But the moment you stop begging to be noticed, you start noticing yourself. And that's when things truly begin to change.